Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending the public forum for the Chief of Police for City of Tempe process. My name is Lawrence Lavictoire, and I'm with the Human Resources Department. And I'll hand the mic over to Andrew Ching, the City Manager. He's going to give a brief introduction.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's not too many other things that a city can do, that a city manager and a community can do, that's more important, I think, than selecting the next chief of police. This is something that I take very seriously. I have tried for the last 6 months plus to make sure that this process is one that is community-based as much as possible. I held a couple of forums prior to advertising the position to get the input of the community, to make sure that those of you here in the audience tonight and everybody who couldn't make it here understood that this was about how best to deliver public safety services to our community, and who would be the best person to lead our Tempe Police Department now and into the future. And I'm very pleased that we have what I think you will agree at the end of this forum, 3 very qualified and very capable candidates for that position. But that doesn't come by accident. The work of our Human Resources Department has been exemplary. We got over 40 applications nationwide and did an extensive recruitment, a lot of outreach to different parts of the country to try to obtain the best applicants. We interviewed 11 in the first round, and we're able to narrow it down to the 3 individuals who were seated here before you this evening. So I thank you for coming on a weeknight to come and to hear what they have to say. I encourage you very much to ask questions. They have been already today through 2 employee forums, so they're certainly prepared, I know, to continue to receive questions. This is an opportunity for me to hear how they respond, to hear the sorts of things that this community is concerned about when thinking about public safety. It's something I take very seriously, and I want to know prior to making a selection that we have as thoroughly vetted candidates as we possibly can, and that we pick the right person, again, to lead this police department. So thank you very much for your time.
First, I want to ask if everybody has a feedback form. If you do not have a feedback form, please feel free to raise your hand, and our staff will get you that form. On the bottom of the form, you'll notice that there's a demographic. It asks you to put your zip code. That just sort of helps us in terms of when we're collating that information to recognize, regionally into Tempe as to, where the feedback is coming from. The forum will run till 8 o'clock. The candidates will be asked questions from you at the audience. We have 2 individuals that will be able to provide you a mic so that it'll be heard by everyone here, easier to pick up. Each candidate will go ahead and answer that question, and we'll sort of do a rotation of the candidates in terms of what order they answer those questions. What we do ask is that the question should be broad enough in which all 3 candidates could respond to. The candidates will have 3 minutes in order to respond to each question, and at the end of the forum, each candidate will have an opportunity to do closing remarks. And what we're going to begin with today is the candidates will have 4 minutes to give a brief introduction about themselves. And we'll start with Chief Sylvia Moyer, who's from El Cerrito, California.
Thank you. Good evening. So what might it look like and be like if I was your police chief? I think in helping you answer that question, I will describe some of my experience in policing, both as a 5.5-year police chief and where I grew up, which was in Sacramento. Grew up in policing in Sacramento, California. That will give you an idea of how to answer that question. I think you'll get a better picture of what is important to me and how I can be of service to the community. So, as a police chief, I entered the El Cerrito Police Department from the outside. And what that means is that I entered as someone that was not from the police department. I entered, and what I did was I listened. I started from within, and I built out. I listened to the employees of the police department about what we did well, what we needed to strengthen, and if I asked them, if you were chief for a day, what's something you would do? And I came up with an incredible list of things we needed to do. And we started tackling all of those things that we needed to strengthen. And we stopped doing a lot of things. I recognized that employees had a lot of opinions about how we police. And what we did was we created an organizational shift, an organizational strengthening that created a brand new culture, a revised and invigorated culture of community-oriented policing in El Cerrito. And that was really important for me as a police chief. Also, as a police chief, I represent all California police chiefs on the executive committee for the California Police Chiefs Association. And what that means is that I'm one of 5 people that represents 330 municipal police chiefs serving 37 million Californians. And we influence policy, we influence strategy. All of that was bolstered by the fact that I grew up in Sacramento, in the Sacramento Police Department. And what you need to know about that is that I showed that I have the tactical and the operational and the technical proficiency of a municipal police officer. I did a lot of the stuff that is done in Tempe. I commanded special events. I commanded large commands of officers that were providing frontline law enforcement service and first response to a very diverse community. So I did a lot of operational things. I was a detective for a short period of time. I was an academy instructor, an academy commander, and I served the really great work of working on the budget and commanding the budget in the office of the chief. But I would like to also highlight that that's all really important because I have to be a cop first and a police officer in my corps. That's important, but you also should know in what it would be like if I was your chief. Inclusion and relationships with the community and genuine outreach is part of my DNA. It is what you get when I'm your police chief. As a trainer in the academy in cultural diversity and other learning domains, I learned about the humanity of policing and how some communities view democratic policing very differently. It was humbling, it was inspiring, it was educational, and it reminded me that we are of the public and the public is of us. As Sir Robert Peel said, really the father of modern day policing, he said, the police are the people are the police. Committing as a guardian of people and committing in a very human, enthusiastic, inclusive way is what you get when you get me as your police chief. And as I stand before you today, I can tell you that I am excited and honored to answer your questions throughout the evening. Thank you.
Next is Chief John Rush with the City of Tempe.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. I'm sure I will get the opportunity to talk about how I will do the job tonight and what I'm going to do. But I wanted to take this time to tell you a little bit about who I am. I was born and raised primarily in Kansas and Missouri, and at the age of 15, my dad told me, we're going to move to Kingston, Jamaica. He had been heavily involved in developing social service agencies throughout his career, and he had the opportunity to do the same thing in Kingston. So I moved to Kingston. I went through high school there, graduated from high school, and then I was looking around the country to decide where I would attend college. It was down to University of Texas at Austin and Arizona State University. And after visiting Tempe, I was sold. After visiting the university, I was sold on this city. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about my experiences at ASU. I was heavily involved in the university. I was involved in student government. I worked for ASU PD, And the most significant part of going to ASU is that that's where I met my beautiful wife, Donna, who's here tonight. And just an interesting note about that, I was her resident advisor in the dorm. She was my resident. So that's how that happened. But the other thing that happened at ASU is I fell in love with this city. I fell in love with it because of all that it offered. It had the university. I loved that. I loved the diversity. I loved that there was an absolute energy to this city that I couldn't get anywhere else. I had looked and I hadn't found it. This is where I wanted to be. This is where I wanted to stay. So I got hired in the Tempe Police Department in 1993, and in my tenure in Tempe PD, I worked a variety of assignments. I worked patrol, field training officer, worked as a detective, detective sergeant, bike squad, internal affairs, and ultimately I promoted up the ranks, and I've spent the last 9 years as the assistant chief of police. So that kind of gives you a rundown of some of the things about who I am. But the one thing that I want to stress to you is everything that I want to do in this community has to do with you. You are involved in everything that we're talking about. Ultimately, here's what I want. Nationally, there are a lot of things happening. There are issues where there are very high-profile deaths, high-profile issues involving law enforcement. And what I want our community to see when they see that Tempe patch is it means something different. When you see that New York officer, Chicago officer, Ferguson officer, you know Tempe police officers. You know what your agency is like, and you can make that distinction and say, that's not how my agency is. And what I want to talk about tonight is what it's going to take to get there. Because to get there involves having a relationship with people in this room. It is having that dialogue at the chief level, but also having that dialogue at every level of the organization so that you know our Tempe officers, our Tempe employees.
Next is Chief Chris Vicino from the city of Riverside, California.
Good evening. My name is Chris Vicino. I come to you from the city of Riverside, California. Riverside is the 12th largest city in the state of California, and it's the 59th largest city in the United States. We have a population of about 320,000. We operate with 375 police officers and about 150 civilian employees. Prior to that, I served 25 years with the city of Pasadena. I served in every rank, from officer to detective to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, commander, deputy chief, and eventually as the interim police chief for 19 months. In 2008, I'm proud to say I served that entire year. We lowered a violent crime rate by 22%. We did that with the help of the community. We did that with good police work. And in ensuing years, that crime rate continued to go down. I'm very proud of that because the 2 ensuing years before that, we had spikes in violent crime. So we left the city in fine condition. When I went to Riverside, Riverside was in turmoil. They had lost their police chief, they had lost their assistant chief, and they had lost their deputy chief. And when I got there, many changes needed to be made to culture, many changes needed to be made to the discipline process to treat employees fairly. And community policing needed a great rejuvenation. We spoke to employees today about a lot of different things. We didn't speak a lot about community policing, and I wanted to save that for you because it's probably the most important topic. And I saw during the city managers' forums with you that it came out as the #1 topic, that you wanted more or increased community policing. So what is community policing? You may have something in mind, and I may have something in mind, so I wanted to share with you what I thought community policing was or is. It's not a bike patrol. It's not any one program. It's not every now and then engaging with young children out of school. It's a philosophy that permeates from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top of engaging the citizens in a community and helping them solve problems. It's something we do day in and day out. It's a philosophy that says law-abiding citizens deserve input into the police process. It's very simply done. 30 years ago, when I was a young cop, we would come into your neighborhood and we would tell you your problem. Remember those days? I hope those days don't exist ever again. You live in your neighborhood. You know your neighborhood. You know the problems of your neighborhood. We should be coming into your neighborhood and asking you, what are the problems you're experiencing? And then we work with you hand in hand in solving that problem. And what that means is we sit at your kitchen table and say, how can we solve this? How can you participate? How can other neighbors participate with us? And then the police bring the resources to solve those problems. That's community policing. That's my belief of what community policing is. It's not a simple program. It needs to be rejuvenated. How many of you know your neighborhood cop? Raise your hand. I faced a dilemma in Pasadena when I was the police chief, and the community told me over and over again, we don't know our cops, we don't know our cops. I looked at our deployment, and what I found was because of shortage of patrol officers, they were getting different cops each and every time. Someone knew that they had to explain the same problem to. How many times do you call a department store and you get put on hold and you talk to somebody else, then you talk to somebody else, you talk to somebody else, you finally hang up, you call back the next day with the same problem, and the same thing happens. I want you to get as much as possible, as many times as we can afford to, send you the same cops. So you don't start from square one. You start from where you ended with them yesterday or the week before. They know what the problem that has existed, and you don't have to go back to square one. That's a community policing philosophy. I believe in community policing. It's the only way that you can properly police a community. Thank you.
In terms of the first question, it'll be Chief Rush, then Chief Vecino, then Chief Moyer. And I want to open the questions to anyone in the audience. If you just raise your hand, then one of our people with the mics will bring the mic to you.
Okay, I guess I'll break the ice here. Yeah, so I've got a few questions here. My name's Joe Strutman. I'm the leader of the Pecos Action Group, and we're dedicated to cyclist safety and mobility. And so my questions, I got to give you a little bit of background first. You know, our members, we're all acutely aware that there's some dangerous issues with the police department leadership and officers interpreting or misinterpreting the Arizona revised statutes with respect to bicycles and motor vehicles, and this adversely affects the safety of cyclists. There's many examples I have, but I'll just use the 3-foot law as a quick example. The Arizona revised statute 28-375 very clearly states that a motor vehicle passing a bicyclist shall leave a safe passing distance of at least 3 feet. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts on that. That's just the law. But I have documentation right here from the city of Tempe that clearly states that the police department does not believe the 3-foot law applies when a cyclist is in a bike lane. And that's clearly not the lawful interpretation of that statute. You know, besides defying logic, common sense, and any kind of risk analysis you want to apply. So I wondered, you know, was this just at the top, or was this filtered down through the police department? So I was at a community meeting that Colby Brandville put on in our community.
And your question, sir?
There. I'm sorry?
Your question?
Okay. So anyway, the officer had the same response. He did not know the law and was advocating otherwise. So my questions are, what actions will you take as the police department chief to educate and train the leadership and the officers on the Arizona revised statutes as they apply to bicyclists? And then secondly, how will you measure the effectiveness of those actions? And the last question, how will you partner with the cycling community to develop trust? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Sorry for the long-winded
No, it's all right.
question.
No, it helped add some context to it, because bicycling in our community is a great thing. I mean, it is something that is a big part of our community. But what we need to stress in our community, and it applies to bikes as well as it does to a variety of other things, and it's to keep people absolutely as safe as we possibly can. Title 28 is a tool to do that. When I'm talking to police officers about the application of Title 28, I am asked all the time, can you just have the officers write this or that ticket? And there are times when that is appropriate. Other times, education is the appropriate response, and there's a variety of tools in our tool chest. The ultimate goal is to keep people safe. And so when you're asking how do you measure any effectiveness, the way you measure effectiveness is the collisions you need to monitor closely, the driving behavior, not just of the people in the cars, but the bicyclists themselves. So there's a variety of things that you need to monitor. And I'll give you an example of some of the things that we've done recently to try to understand this issue in particular. We had the same kind of question come up where our traffic lieutenant was tasked with the job, try to understand where people are coming from. So we put a cop on a bike with the bicyclists that were outlining, here's an issue for us. And so we rode along with them. We also staged a couple of motorcycle officers prepared to write the tickets, prepared to do the education, prepared to do whatever we need to do to ensure people are safe on our roads. And so we are prepared to go the extra mile to connect with the bicycle community, and we will continue to do so. Here's the challenge for us. There's 12,000 brand new students at ASU every single year, and some of them are very experienced riders, some of them are not experienced riders at all. And so a lot of the education needs to take place on the bicycle side, and we put a heavy emphasis on that as well, because the ultimate goal is to make sure they are safe and the drivers are safe and following Title 28. It's absolutely incumbent on me for the officers to understand Title 28, but more importantly, how to appropriately use that discretion to use Title 28 as an educational tool or writing the ticket.
Joe, is your concern the casual rider or the enthusiast who is out there every single day, or is it both?
It's both.
Okay. So it's a disadvantage when you ask a question, to me it's a disadvantage, when you ask a question that pertains to something along the lines I think you said was, you know, did that come from the top or the bottom? So you're asking a question that was based on some decision that got made or your belief that some decision got made at the Tempe Police Department to enforce or not to enforce. And since I'm from California, I can't speak to Title 28 and how it's enforced or it's not enforced. But what I can speak to is the solution of the problem. And I think that you're a cyclist, obviously. So maybe you'll enjoy this story. So around the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, it's nearly a perfect mile. I mean, and so as a cyclist, having a perfect mile to ride around is something highly sought after, especially on a warm summer night. And so we would get 300 or 400 cyclists going around the Rose Bowl for 2 hours. And they would basically be racing, you know, unofficially but officially. Not stopping for stop signs, and a lot of people walk around the Rose Bowl every night. And this became obviously a conflict between drivers, walkers, and cyclists. You can imagine with 300 and 400 bikes going around, it was a nightmare for the residents in the area, for the cyclists, and for the walkers. Now, besides putting some speed bumps out there, I don't think we were going to solve that problem besides meeting with each group. So what we did to enforce some of the things that we wanted to enforce, like stop signs and distance between walkers and riders and staying in the street, and cyclists staying in the street and walkers staying in their lane because there was actual walking lane, we began to formulate a meeting between the cyclists individually, the walkers individually, and then some educational elements for the residents who live in and around the Rose Bowl who use those same roads. There was a lot of anger between the walkers and the cyclists. So we had individual meetings, but eventually we brought them together and we came up with solutions, and the cyclists eventually conceded 5 nights a week, and they were cycling Tuesday and Thursday nights, and the walkers were backing down at certain hours in terms of their use of that area too. So the solutions can be found in some sort of moderation between groups and moderating 2 groups, bringing them together, police maybe as facilitator, getting them to talk to one another eventually, first us, but then together. And all we did was stand back, and the groups figured out their own scheduling, and they came up with the scheduling. I know that doesn't have much to do with, with your question per se, but you did say, how would you solve that? And I think it's important to let you know that we would, you know, I would dive in and cause meetings to happen and cause dialogue to happen.
So it's interesting to me that 2 of the questions that I got before we came in here were about cycling, and the teabag rep and some others were asking me about cycling. And it's fascinating to me because anytime a community engages in multimodal transportation and trying to get people out walking and cycling and other forms of transportation, there's going to be conflict. And there are going to be times where you're going to try to figure out how all these various groups can use city streets and city assets safely and respectfully. I was told today that McClintock Drive was widened to give bike lanes, designated bike lanes. I think there's some clapping in the back. And that's a sign. That's a vibration. This is a vibration that needs to be amplified, that there's a bigger thing going on. The bicycling community and the police department that is responsible for the enforcement, the investigation of any collision, need to get together and have a conversation. We talked earlier, and I think this is really important for this conversation and answering your question, is that anything related to traffic, and I would say bicycles are kind of traffic related, involves 3 components. And those are engineering, education, and enforcement. And if there are collisions, if there are any kind of interactions between a bicyclist, a car, a pedestrian, or other, we have to examine through those 3 lenses. The police department can be involved in any of those 3 lenses and should be at the table having the conversation about engineering where appropriate and deferring to the intelligence specialists that engage in engineering. We need to engage in education on both sides of the conflict, and then finally resulting in enforcement. From a leadership perspective, I can answer this question in this way. The law changes all the time. That's one of the really groovy things about the law, is it's always changing, and police officers are engaging in really learning about the changes in the law. And we even saw officers walking to training today to learn the new statutes. So it is about engaging in what is really intended and meant under how the law is written. And if there is conflict in interpretation, we need to clarify that conflict and often bring people together to have that conversation and rely on intelligent people who interpret the law as a practice and as a specialty to give us some guidance. So there's mutual understanding. What's difficult in what was proposed is it sounds like there's conflict on what the law means. And so a leadership way to get through that is to have the conversation with everybody at the table so we come to some kind of mutual understanding on what that law means.
The order of the next question will be Chief Vicino, then Chief Moyer, then Chief Rush. And what I'm going to do is take one of the written questions that were submitted just prior to the forum. How diverse is the community where you serve now, and what is your plans to build up a diverse police department and interacting with the community at large?
Did you say groovy earlier?
Yeah, I did actually. That was a throwback.
No, it's very cool.
Out of sight.
The law is groovy. I couldn't help it.
I'd give her kudos for that. I'm the old guy in the room. That was cool. So Riverside is 50% Hispanic. It's somewhere in the 30s, 35-ish, 34-ish, white or Caucasian. We are probably 7% or so African American, and then the remaining numbers are probably Pacific Islander, somewhere in there. The community, and so I've been there for 5 years, so 25 years in Pasadena. Pasadena, very similar to that. About 50% Hispanic, probably 32, 35% Caucasian or white, maybe 7 or 8% African American, and then again maybe about 10% Asian. So very diverse. So I'll start with Pasadena first. Pasadena, the police employees in Pasadena, if you overlay their demographics to the community, they're identical. It didn't happen accidentally, but they're identical. Pasadena was just applauded by the Department of Justice for having a police department that looks like its community. I take no credit for that. That began a long time ago. I did participate in that, but I don't take ultimate credit for that. It's a community that's very sensitive to ensuring that those who are doing the policing of the community look like their community. Riverside is a little more challenged that way. So it is in our strategic plan that we have just built to try to ensure that happens. But there's a phenomenon happening right now, and I don't know if it stretches to Arizona, but let me discuss this in terms of our officers. Our officers, in terms of our Hispanic officers, because I see all the applications and I see all of the backgrounds, there is a wide array of Hispanic officers in the pipeline. That number will take care of itself. It will just happen because of the population in Southern California. It will just take care of itself. Not so in the African American community. The applications aren't there in policing. I also teach at a community college. I've taught for about 16 years. And what I've noticed in there in my criminal justice classes that I teach, when I first started, my classes were half and half. A lot of young white kids and young African American kids wanting to get in law enforcement. And over 15 years, Hispanic, little or no Caucasians, but no African Americans in my classes anymore. It's a very strange thing. It's a strange phenomenon. I watched it happen right in front of me. So we need to find new ways to attract the people who look like our community, so our police officers look like our community. That is an effort, I believe, that the police department can do and will do with the local community to come up with ideas on how to enrich the police department with that makeup. But I do believe in it. I did it and participated in Pasadena, and we are working on it in Riverside. It is a fundamental good thing for us to look like our community.
I had a fantastic professor in my undergrad studies who said, we are, as human beings, conscious of kind. I thought, what does that mean? Like most things, I ask a lot of questions because I'm inquisitive. I said, what does that mean? And he said, we are naturally attracted to people that are like us. I thought, that's very interesting. The place where I am a chief now is predominantly white in population. The second largest group is Chinese. And in our Chinese community, we have an array of Chinese-speaking people. And the next group, in terms of demographics, because that is part of the question, is Latino or Hispanic, and then followed by African American and other. The larger community where I police is one of the most diverse places on the planet. The San Francisco Bay Area is an incredibly diverse place with incredibly diverse thinking people, speaking people, religious people, and it requires a very agile and nimble police department to police an array of people with different expectations. My previous experience in Sacramento also solidified the need for me as a police leader to engage in policing for people and groups that had predominantly been or historically been marginalized. Some groups that have inherent distrust in the police, undocumented populations that need police guardianship, that want to help and be part of solving problems in a community, but they don't believe that they won't be deported as a result of a contact with the police. That is a problem. Something that's really important to me is to remind ourselves that our character is revealed on every contact we have with the community. That is the why we police. There's some what we do, there's some how we do it, but there's this bigger, larger question of why we are guardians of the people. My plan in Tempe would be to assess where we are, assess where do we have gaps, assess where we need to strengthen, and I will make a big commitment here. I will do here what I do now, and that is I meet with every single person who gets to the final phases of the application process to join the department. Why? Because I want to know that they have the character and the competence to earn the badge as a symbol of public trust, that they get community policing, that they understand policing in communities, and that we are part of the community that we police, and that they're answering the call to service instead of answering the call to adventure. So that is where I come from and what I would do here in Tempe.
I said in the beginning in my introduction, the reason why I fell in love with Tempe. And one of the reasons why I said it felt like it had an energy. It felt like it had something special. Well, that one thing that made it feel that way was the diversity that our city has. Even in this room, there's tremendous diversity. But it is what is exciting about this city. We have ASU here in our city, the largest public university in the country. It is here. 100 languages being spoken here every single day. And so when we're talking about diversity in the police department, looking at the color is just the beginning. We do in the Tempe Police Department have, if you look at the demographics in terms of color, we do reflect the community. But the diversity in our city is so... Sorry. Is that me? I don't even know where I was. Anyway. But the diversity in our community is so different. It goes so far beyond just color. And those are the things that give us strength. And when we build a police department, it is trying to identify diversity in our community to add to our strength. And so some of the things that we can do to help with that is when we identify and hire new police officers, there are those officers that absolutely love to be around people just like them. That's where they're comfortable. They may not even realize it. And then there are officers who absolutely love diversity because they like surrounding themselves with new ideas, new people, new cultures, all of those things. And that's the kind of people we want to hire. And we want to identify those people to hire by including the community. To say, who are the cops you want to police you? Who are the cops that you think recognize all those special things in our community and can help us take the diversity of our community and move us all to be an even greater community where we all are welcome, where everybody can come from all over the world, which they do now, and they feel comfortable, they feel the energy, and they feel what is special about Tempe, just like we do.
Yes, my question is twofold. One of the things that our organization in Tempe, we go out to poor areas where it's difficult, maybe sometimes police don't go. But knowing that, the guidance that I got from the police department, asking Charles down at the PD, and again, thanks to Alter Rutch, they came out and explained the demographics of what's going on in the police department. Our office, our leadership and the neighbors that we have aren't really familiar with what the PD is doing in some situations. And I think we need, the bottom line is, how are you going to reach out to the minorities in certain areas, especially the nonprofits that are going out, serve the community, those in need and the working poor. And the second thing is the youth of our city. One of the things that has worked, I think, is the police and fire football game, okay? You don't build that up enough. That's a community thing. And we invite all the kids to it. There's no charge at all, but we want the neighborhood kids to come in. Instead of going out there tagging or whatever they're doing, you know, come on, let's get into something positive. So we ask them to volunteer. Now, I would like to hear from you all how you would approach that as far as community service and informing your community and all the nonprofits that are here.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think I'll distill that into these kind of meaningful pieces, which is what would I do as your chief to reach out to the community, connect with the community. The second piece is with youth. Does that honor your question? Okay, that make it easier for you guys too. So how would I reach out? As I said before, I believe wholly that our character's revealed on every contact that we have. I love people. That's why I became a cop, because I love people. We have to encourage officers to engage in conversation with people before there's a call for service, when they're not simply responding to a need or a person in crisis. Because cops actually like talking to people. The majority of cops like talking to people, and the only reason the cops are in the back is because they can't fit with gun belts in the arms, except you are a courageous soul. Yes. So there's a whole bunch of things that I think we should do. So strengthen our outreach in terms of traditional and social media to connect with the community. I'm sure you have the Tempe app. I have the Tempe app, and it is in the process of converting to being able to be read in Spanish. That's exciting, so people can ask questions in Spanish, and the reply will go back to them in Spanish. That is something that absolutely needs to happen. I believe and have seen the strength of community academies, citizen academies. And what it does is it invites select people from the community, not select as in important, but select numbers of people into the police department to more closely understand or more deeply understand the profession of policing and the law and a whole array of things, why we do what we do, for instance, on traffic stops. It makes sense for us to engage in those conversations, not only for the police department, but for the community. So engaging in those things, I think, is really important. It also demystifies a lot of what we do in policing. And it's not like it is on TV a lot of times. The other part of your question is regarding youth. We have endless opportunities to engage with youth. With SROs, school resource officers, we have in Tempe an Explorer program. They'll be competing in an Explorer competition this weekend in Chandler. And so engaging with youth who can come into the police department, learn about policing, and humanize the policing effort and have not only an understanding of service, but have a connection with a police officer is strength. There are also models such as police athletic leagues. And I'm really interested in your police-fire football game. Is that cops and firefighters playing each other? Interesting. Very interesting. So there are endless opportunities for us to engage. The majority of it is that it has to be led from the top, it has to be seen as important, and it has to be not just something we do, but something that it's who we are.
I'll start this off with a story that I guess addresses how do we interact with nonprofits and kids. And the story goes like this. We will go out every year to serve Thanksgiving dinner to the kids and families at the Boys and Girls Club. And generally it was chiefs and maybe some members of command staff who would do this. And what we did this year when we went out there is I stopped by, talked to a patrol squad and said, why don't you guys join me? And we did that on the west side and we did it at the north side. And if you can picture, and some of them were great, but some of them were fairly new officers who are prepared to go in the door, face the person with the gun, but if you ask them to go in front of a room of 100 8-year-olds, they start to get scared. But they went there and they did phenomenal. They were nervous for about 10 feet into the room, but they were armed with police stickers and they were passing out stickers, and I would say within 20 minutes they were up in front of the room singing Christmas carols with kids, members of the community, and their families. And that was a connection that we absolutely needed to make, because what we do as an organization isn't just making arrests, it is making those connections. And so I use that example because it illustrates the way I would approach it. First, there needs to be some structure around what we do. We need to have those connections with the nonprofit to even know that it's happening. And so one of the things that we do now is we'll meet as a command staff and say, what do we have on the calendar? What are the events that we have coming up, so that we can connect at that level to understand what is going on in our community. But it's not a command staff issue. What's critical is making those connections, and you illustrated it before too, making those connections with the police officers. Seeing the kids with the police officers is where it counts. I want those kids to understand, and I mentioned this before, when they see that Tempe patch, it means something. That is the cop I trust. That is the cop that sang Christmas carols with me. That is the cop that had the sticker. That is the cop that is going to keep me safe. That is the cop that I trust. And so when it comes down to building relationships, it's going to take a variety of forms. It may be serving dinner. It may be passing out stuffed animals. It may be shop with a cop. It may be a neighborhood cleanup. It may be a variety of things. But the police department's role is to connect with the community, and it's going to look a variety of ways. But my job isn't just for me to connect. My job is to get 500 employees to connect. So that's what I see my role, is to get 500 people engaged with you.
I'm going to take some notes because I want to answer your question as completely as I can. So I took a few notes while my compadres were talking. When I went to Riverside from Pasadena, there was no outreach going on. Nothing. Shucks, they weren't even talking to the press. It's a kind of a strange situation, a strange department when I got there. There was also no funding to do some of the outreach we wanted to do. So we created our own nonprofit, the Riverside Police Foundation. And the motto for the Police Foundation was service to youth. I believe there's nothing more wholesome than police working with the young kids. And there are so many spin-off benefits, we could stand here all night and talk about those. The major spin-off benefit is sustainability for a city. When you start with these kids at young ages and they look up to police officers, police officers are their mentors, or they're their coaches, or they're just having positive interactions with them at school. If you develop programs that continually and ongoing and we do this, those kids will stay out of trouble over their lifetimes, and we're not going to be chasing them and putting handcuffs on them. I really believe that. But that's a long-term proposition. But surprisingly, we did it in less than a couple of years in Riverside. So we raise about $100,000 to $150,000 with only 3 fundraisers for our foundation. So every year we give away or support to the tune of about $150,000, and all goes to youth programs. We have created and partnered with the UCR, University of California swim team. We use their pool. We make a donation to their swim team through the foundation, and they teach underprivileged kids that summer how to swim. Some of these kids have never even been in a pool. And so they get a camp. They go to the summer camp, they go to the college, but when they're done swimming, they get a tour of the college, and they get told and whispered in their ear, you can go to college too. It's a big impact. The UCR boxing team is our partner also. We have created a youth program in one of our underprivileged areas in our town to teach boxing. And these kids are in competitions. It's a wonderful thing to see, and they're generating all of their activities towards something that's positive. We also created something called the Riverside Karate Judo program. I'm sorry, not karate, judo. In that program, we have kids that are autistic who are being taught judo, where their parents and their friends had a hard time even touching them because they didn't want to be touched. Now they're rolling around on mats with other kids, and police officers are teaching them how to do these things. The city supported us and gave us a space for this. It's a beautiful program. We have a youth court. We have explorers. We created El Protector. We have a Police Activities League where the Police Foundation partners in the summer with our Parks and Recreation for their camps, and we support underprivileged kids. We pay their fee so they can attend these camps in the summer, and they get to pick what camp they go to. We impact probably in one summer probably about 5,000 children. We have an SRO program. We have a dedicated officer at every high school. We have something called Blue Elves, where police officers in mass deliver Christmas presents throughout the community. And these things are funded by the Police Foundation. We buy the toys, and we make sure that kids who normally don't get Christmas presents get them from police officers. And then we have an Easter egg hunt where we host in our city parks, funded by the Police Foundation, an Easter egg hunt for kids to come and participate. And I don't dress up like a bunny. I know I could probably do that. You'd like that. But they're out there with us, and they see us, and we always wear our uniforms when we do this. So there's a connection between the uniform and the cops and the kids. So service to youth is something that is in me and it always has been, came from Pasadena and through Riverside, and I would bring those thoughts and those beliefs to Tempe. Connecting with the nonprofits goes hand in hand with this. Nonprofits help get things like this done. They can help us with volunteers. They can help us with all sorts of things. So utilizing nonprofit organizations in any community is a good idea. Thank you.
The next order of the questions will be with first Chief Rush, then Chief Vicino, then Chief Moyer. Question from the audience? Excuse me.
Yes, I have one here. My name is Mary Bishop.
If you can hold for 1 second, we'll get you a microphone. Oh, she does. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong area. The lights here, I can't see where it is.
My name is Mary Bishop, and I'm probably one of the oldest residents in the city of Tempe. I've lived in the city of Tempe since 1964. And I've watched the police because one of my favorite programs is Cops. And I'm going to tell you why I watch that. I watch that to see how the police react to different people. And watch the police to see if he uses this, does this, L-I-E, lie. And some of them do and some of them don't. My question to you is, if you had a situation where an officer had done something and his buddies adjust their stories to accommodate his buddy, how would you handle that? Especially when you have found out that a lie has been told.
Well, that's a great question. And here's the way I guess generally I approach discipline. If you're a Tempe police employee and you make an honest mistake, you are going out there taking calculated risks, you're trying to serve the community, you are consistent with the values that we talk about all the time, and you make an honest mistake. I will be there to encourage you, coach you, support you through that process. That is part of being a police employee, a police officer. If you make a criminal mistake, if you make a mistake that is not consistent with our values, not consistent with who we are as an organization, then you're not going to work here. We do have on our side several laws in place. And one of those laws has to do with Brady. We call it Brady, but it's named after a court case called Brady versus Maryland. And Brady versus Maryland is a court case where if you are a line officer, for example, that is relevant information in a criminal case where we have to turn that over to the defense. That's what that court case says. And I, as chief, I do not want to keep a cop there that potentially is going to taint a criminal case in the future. They are dealing with some very, very real cases, real victims that can impact someone's life. And so when you are on that list, that is significant, not just to that officer, not just to me as a police chief. That is significant to every member of this community. So I guess to sum up, answer your question very, very simply, you make that kind of mistake inconsistent with who we are, and that is not who we are, then that person is not going to work here.
Well, Miss Mary Bishop, since you watch Cops, if you go back into your archives, you'll see me as a very young officer in Sacramento Police in 1993 on Cops. It wasn't pretty, so you'll have to forgive me. I think it was actually cut, and it's on the Too Hot for TV video. I think it was on VHS, actually. So I agree with Chief Rush. We have standards. We have Brady that says that if an officer is dishonest, that is something that we disclose. Here's what you need to know, I think, really to this issue. There are some things that come to our attention through an allegation. We, as professional police officers, conduct an entire unbiased investigation to gather all facts surrounding that allegation, and then we have a finding. A finding has an array of sustained and not sustained and an array of findings. But I will tell you this, without exception, there is one thing that will find a police officer in a field other than policing faster than anything, and that is lying. Dishonesty is completely unacceptable, and it is the kind of offense that you can't recover from. You can't recover from it because the badge is not only a symbol of public trust, but it says we will be honest in thought and deed. We have a law enforcement code of ethics that guides us. And so, to me, this is a really quick answer to you, Mary, and it is that there are things that there are allegations and things that occur that we can retrain. We can use education-based discipline. We can suspend. We can do other things, but lying is not one of those things that we can recover from. So it is an offense that is the highest offense for a police officer, is to lie. And it's completely unacceptable, and I agree there's no officer that would work for me that has lied.
There's a motto that you would hear me say, and it's fair that you would say this to your workforce right away so they know where you stand. We don't lie, cheat, or steal. We don't tolerate anyone among us who does. So I'm in accordance with the two chiefs, and I have done that. And there's nobody in this room, police officer or community member, that wants a liar wearing a badge and a gun in their community. I fired a 30-year employee who did that. I slept well at night. It was a hard decision, but I know it was the right decision. So it's a difficult thing, but we cannot have people with the power that a police officer has and have them lying. Police officers have the ability to take away your property and to take away your freedom. We have to trust them. Now let me say this though. When I step into the role as chief, I automatically trust the police officers. I have to. They won't trust me, I get that. I have to earn their trust. But I do trust them right away. They're driving fast cars and they have guns and they can do all the things I just described. I have to trust them. There's no reason not to trust them. But if we have somebody who is in an investigation and it's proven that they have lied, they can't be a police officer anymore.
Okay, the order of the next question will be Chief Moyer, then Chief Vicino, then Chief Rush. There we go.
Good evening. My name is Benjamin Taylor. I'm an attorney out here. I do a lot of cases out here in Tempe. And the legislature just recently in the Senate introduced a bill that was trying to ban filming of police officers within 20 feet. And it'll be a misdemeanor. I just want to get your opinion on how do you feel about filming officers and this new law that was introduced into our legislature about banning filming of police officers by citizens.
Thanks, Benjamin. There's been a lot of research that has shown that technology is impacting policing more than any other profession. And I think we've seen a lot of evidence of that. This, as introduced and as I understand it, would make it a misdemeanor offense to film a police officer if you get within 20 feet. My hunch is that that would be designed to reduce a conflict between a person who's filming and a peace officer attempting to effect an arrest or engage in an interaction with the community. Part of that makes sense. Part of it makes sense from my tactical policing mind that when we are engaged with a human being, likely a human being in crisis of some kind, or they're in conflict, they have a need for the police, which is typically not the greatest event for a human being to have a need for a cop. But my tactical mind says this, that I would be focused in engaging with the person. And the 360-degree awareness is important, but I would not want to concern myself with keeping someone back not knowing them. Conversely, I think I want people to film the police because I believe we do the right thing a lot. There are millions and millions and millions of, not that many, but maybe one of those millions, interactions between a police officer and a citizen every year in our society. The majority of those we hear nothing about because they go well. An individual is served, they are guarded, they are treated with dignity and respect, but we are seeing those few that are bad. They don't represent who we are. They don't represent why we police. They don't represent the humanity. They don't represent the wide sweeping call to service that we have answered as cops. So part of me says, I get it tactically. The other part of me says, I get the desire and the need for people to want to film. One of the things we grapple with in policing is people are taking videos of events and posting them on YouTube in open source before we've even resolved the event. That's a thing for us to deal with. Tell you, in California, one thing we did was there were 5 of us that met with the governor about legislation regarding body-worn cameras. And we were concerned about just what Benjamin's raising. What is the intent? What is the effect? And there was some bad legislation, because this legislation said, and it was offered, that every officer, police officer, when engaged with any person, shall film that interaction or be guilty of a misdemeanor. We thought the intent in some ways was really good, but as written, the law was really bad. So for this, I think you can see my conflict, and I would want to know more about it and be at the table and position myself as your chief at the table to have that conversation about, is there language that we can write in that would make this a cleaner bit of legislation? Are there concerns that the community has, and how can we rectify the freedom to film with the safety of a police officer and a human being in an interaction? So thanks for the question, Benjamin.
That's an interesting piece of legislation. I couldn't support it. It's hypocritical. We're all starting to wear body cameras. We're going to film our citizenry, but they can't film us. And I agree with Sylvia. I believe in my heart that police officers put their uniforms on every day, or detectives put their suits on every day, put a gun and a badge on, and they go out, and in their minds they're going to do something good. I don't have concerns for people filming them. I don't have concerns for people filming me. Go ahead. And I don't know how we win that. There's this pesky little document out there called the United States Constitution. You know, it's kind of bothersome that, you know, that would sort of be restricted. I just don't see that even making it. I don't know if that'll make it through the legislature. I don't know. That's in California, I could call that. I know what would happen there. I'm not savvy enough yet in Arizona to be able to say whether I'd make it, but it's hypocritical, and it puts us on the defensive, and we don't need to be on the defensive. We need to say, okay, go ahead. And all of us know that have been in law enforcement long enough. You step out of your car and you're ready to take action, you should assume I'm being filmed. That's okay. Go ahead. I don't think I could support it. It's hypocritical.
I know a lot of you followed when the Pope visited this country this last time. And there was this very memorable photograph that I remember seeing on the Pope's visit this time versus last time. And they showed 2 images side by side. And the first one just had people waving. The second photo had probably 1,000 people around the Pope like this. The phones were everywhere. And that is what has changed law enforcement in a lot of ways. The viral videos that we see across the country, it is changing law enforcement in a lot of ways. But there's 2 things at play in things like that. First one is from the perspective of the community, the citizen. And I agree, it's a constitutional issue. They have a right to do it. They will do it. We educate our police officers all the time on the rights of the community to film our officers. But there's another thing at play that may be driving at least some of this, and that is some of the officer safety things that unfortunately they came up with an arbitrary number like 20 feet. Because what has started happening, and we have that in our own city on Mill Avenue, it is not 20 feet, it is 2 inches. That phone will come up to an officer to film. And that's the reality that we're working with. And so there are 2 things at play. We need to understand as a law enforcement agency what those things are that are driving a lot of these issues. So one of them is an educational thing in terms of constitutional rights. The other piece is an officer safety thing. That kind of legislation, in my opinion, is not necessary. Because if you are, in fact, impeding a police officer's investigation to the point where they can't conduct their investigation any longer, we already have laws on the books to deal with those issues. But that's not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do with working with our community, because those things are still happening on a daily basis. We need to protect the integrity of the investigation, but at the same time, let the community know that you're free to film. Just please don't impede on our investigation. And a lot of that does have to do with education, and it happens on a nightly basis. And I can speak for Mill Avenue because I watch the officers do it. It's on a nightly basis. Sir, please just step back. You're free to film. However, just keep at a safe distance for you and for me.
Okay, the order on this question will be Chief Vicino, then Chief Rush, then Chief Moyer. And I'm going to take one of the other written questions we had, or is there a question? Oh, there's a question over here. Okay. Oh, okay.
I promise I'll be very brief. I'm Pastor Brenda Valdez. But my question is this. I'm listening to plans and implementation for our youth, things of this nature, and to protect our city. Well, as you can see, I'm a very young woman. So therefore, I'm concerned about the young people in my group, okay? You might call some of us seniors. But in any event, what plans do you have to better your relationship with our seniors? I am blessed to live at Westchester Senior Living, and we love our Tempe Police here. We've had a great relationship with our previous chief, and our residents know them by name. They know the assistant. They know Mr. Charles Cobb, you know, and they call by name. Is he coming today? And the wonderful thing about it is you've taken the time to come and educate us on safety. What if there was an active shooter? What should we do? You know, you've done that, and you've made our residents feel safe and secure. So we get excited when we see Tempe Police pull up on property. Do you have any more plans for us? And if you're our chief, what would you do?
There's a place in Riverside called the Janet Goski Center, and it's for our seniors to gather, and it's a community space, if you will. It's a very large piece of property and/or a place for where all sorts of activities happen for them. We put on training for seniors there. I think you probably know this. You're a very savvy young woman. And seniors are often the targets of fraud. And so we put on classes all the time for the different items for which seniors are sometimes targeted. Fraud is one of them, obviously. And so we walk them through what it would look like if someone were knocking on their door asking for something, asking for access to their home so they can actually get into their checkbook and steal a check or things like that. And so we teach them how to identify that first of all, and then if something should happen, if their bank account seems to be fading and someone has got into it, how to recoup that money. We walk them through. We have a program in hand where our detectives will actually work with the senior and work with the credit card companies if their credit cards have been used and things like that to reestablish their credit. And we actually do that hand in hand with detectives and our volunteers. And some of the volunteers are seniors. And so we connect with them in all sorts of ways in educational programs to help protect them. We haven't done what you said, but it sounds like a good idea to inform them on an active shooter scenario. So I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to use that, and I'm going to steal from you and and try to work on that idea in Riverside, and if I'm lucky enough to end up in Tempe, I'll work on that here. But I think that there's great justification for greater education on that issue. But you're right. We have an aging population all over the United States, and we need to take care, and the police department needs to take care of our seniors. So I appreciate your question. Thank you.
John? Yeah, Chief Rush.
Well, I guess first, I want to continue the relationship we have with your community specifically and be personally involved in that. I think the chief should be personally engaged with our community, the big locations within our community, and Westchester is certainly one of them. But I wanted to touch on, and it's related to a lot of things that we did discuss regarding kids. And I thought of that because we actually had Adopt a Senior over the holiday season as well. We did Shop with a Cop, but we did Adopt a Senior. And something I'm very excited about as well is our volunteer coordinator is also wanting to push that forward even more, where police officers can connect with the elderly in our community, and not just them, but also their families. Because we need to know if a family member is worried about their mother, father, grandmother, grandfather in their community, and there's certain things they want to tell us. You know, watch after this family member because, you know, I think they have the onset of Alzheimer's. Can you just check on them? Can you be aware of this person in case they ever get lost? And trying to make those connections so that we have the relationship not just with the seniors in our community, but we develop a structure to support a public safety element in terms of that. It is about relationships, but it is about protecting our elderly population, not just physically, but also there's a number of things in terms of education where it could be financial, it could be a fraud issue, and really telling our seniors some of the things that they want to know, some of the things that they're asking for, but some of the things that they need to know, and some of the things that their family members need to know about how the Tempe Police Department can support them in good times and in bad times. We want to be that agency where you can call and ask for help with, even if you're from out of town, we want to be familiar with their relatives in town so that we can support them.
So, Pastor, I have great comfort in engaging with our aging community. I think largely because I envy you. You are hopefully where I'm going to be someday. And my current, how I approach engaging with the aging community in my community now, I think is an outgrowth of how I was raised. And what I mean by that is my mom was the director of the Davis Senior Citizen Center. That's what it was called then, the Davis Senior Citizen Center. So from the time I was a young kid, I was engaging with a population that was far older than I was. And what I recognized was, and what I did in high school, my senior project in high school, was to start a life story process. And what I mean by that is that certain seniors at the high school would connect with seniors at the senior center, and we would listen to their life story. And we would gather pictures and gather their life story, and what we did as an act of service was we wrote their life story for them. They were heard, they felt valued, it was connective, it was incredibly educational for each of us that engaged in that. And then we produced this story for the seniors and they could share it with their family. And what we heard overwhelmingly was, I learned things about my mom or my grandma or my grandfather that I had no idea about before this. That was a lesson for me that I took forward to how I am now as a chief, is I like going to the senior center for lunch. On Mondays, I bring in fruit and other things from trees at my ranch, and I provide fruit. It's extra stuff. And the aging population in my community enjoys getting fresh fruit and free fruit and other things, and they also enjoy engaging in just a conversation about the struggles that they have. something that is important is we have a lot of homebound aging people that are not connected to services. And the only way that I learned of that in my community that I would apply here is by just having conversation and sitting down for a cup of coffee or lunch with a population that ordinarily I wouldn't engage with. So what we did was we partnered with the library to do home delivery of books. Now you may think it's just about books, but it's about something more than just books. A lot of our aging population lives in homes up on the hill. They don't come down to where the senior center is. So no one assesses them for nutrition and health and other services. So it is a way for us to not only connect, but to assess any of the needs that our aging population has, because they're very isolated. So I think overarchingly I could tell you that the relationship would continue, and I also think that it would grow. So thank you.
The next order on the questions would be Chief Rush, then Chief Moyer, then Chief Vecino, and I believe there was a question on that side of the room.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Pastor Elizabeth Cruz. My husband and I pastor a Hispanic church in Gilbert, but I'm here with my sister, Magdalena Short, who is another pastor from the community in Mesa. And we have another pastor, Pastor Ruben, who is over there. I believe I don't know, he's leaving. He's from Tempe. He's a Hispanic pastor too. The reason why we came is because we are so not concerned, but I'm going to say this. I don't know how to speak, what to say, but this is what I'm going to say. I believe in building, leaving a legacy behind. And I believe the chief of police of Tempe is leaving a good legacy in our community. Because we started working together 5 years ago. We came and knocked on his door, and he came to our doors, he came to our places, and talked to our community about the fears that the Hispanic community has because of the laws and the immigration and the SB 1070 that all of you are aware of. Our fear was, how do we connect the Hispanic community to the police departments or to the government agencies of police for them to report crimes, because they were hiding. They didn't want to report crime for the fear of being deported. And as pastors, we get to hear the stories. We get to see the families. We get to share their fears. Sometimes all we could do is pray, but we decided to take action. And the action is come and knock on the door and talk to the chief of police. And we've been doing that in the state of Arizona, all the cities, even with Sherry or Arpaio, and we have built great relationship because of it. How will you keep building this trust for the people to come and report crimes because of those laws? How will you keep rebuilding the relationship with our Hispanic communities? Maybe coming to our churches and speak to them personally, because that way I feel that it's so much better, so they will take those fear away. And we will have a better community, because when we report crimes, we live safely in our communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. And just to touch on, because you mentioned SB 1070, and I wanted to start with that because in the Tempe Police Department, I really believe that we are at our best, and we're at our best in law enforcement, when we do things based on compassion. And when there are certain laws that come up that restrict our ability to police with compassion, it really hurts us all. Because what we want to build in our community is the belief that when you call the Tempe Police Department, you will be protected. And it doesn't matter where you come from. We are your agency. We cannot lose that relationship with the Hispanic community. And we need the witnesses, we need the victims, we need the ability to protect. And so when we build a relationship with the Hispanic community, that's the relationship that we want to have, where you're going to call us and you're going to get help, regardless of where you came from. And there's a couple of ways that we can do that. And it first starts with the relationship like this. It is, you mentioned going to your church, and it is having, I know one of our commanders just recently went to a church, one of our assistant chiefs, very active with the pastors in the Hispanic community. Another very intriguing idea for me, we've never done it before, but I think it would be great. You've heard of Citizens Police Academy. Citizens Police Academy in Spanish, I think, could take us in that direction. We value the community. We value various cultures, and this is our demonstration that we want to tell you about us, tell you all about the police department, and do it in a way that you can understand, that you're comfortable with, and all of those things. The other piece that, since you mentioned specifically the Hispanic community, one thing that was really helpful to me when I first started here, I worked in what we called Beat 16 at the time. It was in East Tempe, and talking to a member of our community about the history of Victory Acres. And I think that was very valuable for me as a new officer, and to understand the history of our own city, the history of Arizona, how the Hispanic community has developed the city of Tempe and made it what it is today. And so I think there's a variety of ways to connect, educate our police officers, and bring officers onto our department that are going to support everything that we're discussing.
It's Chief Moyer.
So how amazing that there are two pastors like you in one family. Your parents must be very proud. So it sounds like that you're influencing a community. Sounds like you have a relationship that exists that you want to strengthen. I think there are a lot of ways to strengthen it. I don't even pretend to know all the ways, but I can tell you kind of what I'm thinking. And what I'm thinking is doing just that. I've been part of a community academy that was delivered in Spanish. I was part of a community academy that was delivered in Hmong, one that was delivered in Russian, one that was there are an enormous number of people. They want to hear what we're doing, how we will police, who we are in their native tongue. And I think that strengthens our relationship. Operating or meeting on our ground and meeting on your ground and in your neighborhoods is essential to building the relationship. I get a sense that not only would we be strengthened by having a community academy, a citizens academy in Spanish, but I would want to assess what are we doing in terms of press, in terms of pushing out information and receiving information in Spanish. And the strength of Spanish television is enormous. I alluded to earlier that the Tempe Police app, it's free in the App Store, or whichever store you go to for your device, is being worked on right now so it can be delivered in Spanish. That in and of itself is a strengthening opportunity. So I would just merely say to you that with those things being in place and being emphasized at every level of the organization, continuing to meet to talk about what we can do to build trust, to ensure that some communities that feel marginalized or distanced or distrustful of the police engage in relationship, genuine relationship, so that they are served just as others are served. That will enhance the police legitimacy. That will enhance the view from the community that they are being treated with fairness, impartiality, that we are giving them voice, and that they are respected and valued members of the community like everyone else. So thank you, and kudos to your parents for having amazing daughters.
I hate going last.
Yeah.
They took all the good answers. But let me this won't take long because I agree with everything that was said, but it sounds to me like you're concerned, because you are going to get a new police chief, that what Chief Riff has established with you is going to go away. And I just think you got commitment from two that that's not going to go away, and I will commit that that is not going to go away. So you should leave here tonight with the feeling that it's going to continue. What I'm curious about, though, is there, in Pasadena, there was something called the Community Coalition of Clergy. And it was multiracial, and it was very diverse, all different religions. And the clergy would meet with the police chief once a month. And one thing that we did, I thought that was very dynamic, and it was during some violent crime times, is that the clergy would come together and through the advice of the police chief, they would send the same message on Sunday in their own words, but to their followers, it would be whatever message that the group decided, and in their own way, and in their own methodology, and through their own religious beliefs. But in their sermon, they would deliver the same message just once a month. Not every Sunday, but just once a month. And it would be about what's going on in the community. It would be about the police, and it was a very powerful, singular message that the entire clergy was sending out to the community. And they had a motto, and I liked their motto, and they believed that they fought crime through prayer. It was a very cool meeting to go to. It was a very good group, very dynamic group. But if you're concerned that you're going to leave here and you're going to lose that relationship, I think that you have solidified that that's not going to happen. But I would also be interested in a meeting that happens all the time with the clergy to get their thoughts of what's going on in neighborhoods, and what's going on in the Hispanic community, what's going on in the African American community, and so on and so on. That's a great source of information for any police department. It should always be utilized if you're willing to meet like that on a regular basis.
In the order of the next questions, fortunately, Chief Vecino, you won't be last this time. It'll be Chief Moyer, then Chief Vecino, then Chief Rush. And I'm going to take one of the written questions first, if that's okay, because these were submitted earlier. Tell us about your experience with working with schools and with school resource officers.
Great question. So my experience in working with school resource officers is, if you can imagine a community with a great high school, but that in terms of education, but that high school is so fraught with people fighting, with outsiders coming into the school, with conflict, with bad conduct. If you can imagine that, you can imagine the high school that I'm talking about. It was a place where kids were not comfortable going to school at all. They wanted to learn, learning as a path to get something else, to learn, to grow, to thrive, but they weren't comfortable there. And when we effected an arrest of a couple of young men that sexually assaulted a young woman in a very violent way at the school, that was the event that took place for us to take action, to team, to engage in having school resource officers at the school. So let me tell you what happened. So we said, okay, this is a problem. Kids need to be safe. I mean, we've all studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They need safety and security in order to become self-actualized and continue on this process of being fully what they're capable of being, but they weren't safe. We said this is an expensive proposition to put uniformed police officers in a school. This is a scary proposition for a lot of people, including educators, to put uniformed police officers in the school. This is a scary proposition for parents, for students, and an array of people to put uniformed cops in the school, and dang it, why is that necessary? Don't we all ask those questions? But it was necessary in that time. It was necessary, and we engaged in figuring out how are we going to fund this without depriving services in the field, but provide service specifically to address issues at the school. And we did it with a relationship with the school district. They pay for the officers. There's been no effect in terms of a degradation of service in the community, but I'll tell you what happened. Overwhelmingly, kids began to increase their test scores, their attendance, truancy, I was having a moment there, truancy was reduced. Kids were in school, particularly young girls. When they are not in school, they are prone to all kinds of bad things happening to them. We got girls in school. Kids were protected. And you know what has happened now, many years later? People say, gosh, the school, everyone behaves so well. Everybody has relationship. Our cops, we know the kids know the cops. They have community. Kids are safe, they have relationship, they have community, they invite cops to their birthday parties, our school resource officers, and now they're saying, is it really necessary for us to have the police officers there? Everything's so great. So my experience is seeing a need, finding a way to fund the need, serving kids, serving the school without degrading services in other parts of the community. I'll tell you, it's made a significant difference. The biggest thing for us was to engage in the conversation with the kids and with the families that wondered what it would be like to have a uniformed officer in the school, and overwhelmingly they now support the effort. It's been an incredible success for us.
We have talked a lot about youth tonight. I have, and one of the questions was about that, and I heard it from the other chiefs also. If we're saying that our youth are so important to our future, how do we not have an SRO program? It's so impactful to have a police officer on a campus. We probably can't afford to have one on every campus. That's probably not even called for. But at least our high school campuses, we should really look hard and make that happen. We're going to respond there anyway. So why aren't we just there? In Riverside, when the recession hit, and by the way, in Riverside is a unique arrangement between, there's two school districts, the Albert School District and the Riverside Unified School District in Riverside. They actually pay for our officers. They came to us during the recession and they said, hey, we can't afford you. We're struggling with this. We want you there, can't afford you. As a command staff, we made a decision, okay, but we're still going to be there. Let's work out a deal in your MOU where you skip this year, but we're still going to be there. Because if we're not there, if we pull out, all the good that we have done begins to evaporate. We're still going to be there because our patrol cops are going to have to respond anyways. So at every high school, there are 9 high schools in Riverside. So there's a school resource officer at every high school. Within that school resource officer's geographical area, it's all mapped out for them. They also have responsibilities for middle schools and elementary schools. They don't go to those schools every day, but if there's an issue at that school, that resource officer will respond to that same school. So they're familiar with the teacher, with the administrator, and so on, and the kids. So they get the same cop. But they're at the high schools every day. I'm a big believer in that. I could make an argument, since we believe youth is so important, that we interact with them all the time, that it's not the police chief who's the singular most critical element in the public safety field for a community, but it's the school superintendent. Because good schools and safe schools produce, most likely, good citizens. And so, and I'm not shoving off my responsibilities, I'm just suggesting that they are just important and maybe more important. So I would work diligently and hand in hand with the school superintendents to making sure they have what they need from us and vice versa. It's a very important relationship to have in a community.
I'm probably going to date myself with this example, but I mentioned that I was raised in Kansas, and guess what kind of drills we did when I went to grade school?
Tornado.
Tornado drills and fire drills. And we actually called them tornado drills. I don't know where Wizard of Oz got cyclone. I had never even heard that when I lived in Kansas. But those are the drills we did. But it was a very rude awakening to me when I'm talking to my kids and they were telling me about the drills they were doing in their grade school. And I think that you can guess what drills they were doing. They were doing active shooter drills, lockdown drills. That is what was important to them. I was having a briefing with a newer patrol squad about this exact topic about school safety. And I'll date myself again because I said, remember Columbine? And they all said, no, we were about 8 years old when that happened. But Columbine started to change things in our schools. So when we're talking about SROs and schools, it really has two components to it. The first is that relationship with the students, that impact that we can have as cops that no one else maybe can have, where that child looks at us in a different way that they may not see in their neighborhood. And it is about a relationship and making a difference. But it is also about school safety, student safety, and preparing the school, preparing the community, preparing the police department for safety. And so we do have school resource officers in high schools, middle schools, but we also have Adopt-A-School, where we have a number of our police officers who adopt grade schools. We have a commander who has adopted a grade school, and it is a relationship, but it is about protecting the students as well, working with the principals so that they are prepared. They have the lockdown drills nailed down. They are comfortable. And if they have a question from the police department, they have easy access to a police officer that works the streets at the same time they're in session. So when it comes to school resource officers, I absolutely support it. It's critical, not just for the relationship piece, but for the student safety in our community.
My question is, why are you pursuing this position since you're already a chief at a different city? And what would you bring with you in regards to leadership and management that would be different from what you're doing now at what city you're at? And then another one is community neighborhood associations. What do you think about that, and would you be willing to come to different organizations to do speak at our organizations and stuff like that, because we're at the Los Vecinos Association or neighborhood associations?
Let me start with the latter part of your question first. Yes, I would be willing to come. So I have a motto that I don't turn down a meeting, and so I would obviously come and do that. Especially, you know, getting to know the residents is very important, and it's probably the most enjoyable parts of our of the job that we do, is interacting with residents, interacting with the police officers. It's a lot of fun. When budget time comes, not so fun. But the interaction with people is I think, not putting words in their mouth, but I can tell that they enjoy that. And so yes, I would obviously work with the neighborhood associations. So answering the question, coming here and why, back to your very first question, and then I'll shoot for the middle one at the same time. There's never one answer for that. It's not because this and that was it. When you're in a position that the three of us are in, and I'll speak for myself now, and you see a job opening like Tempe, you have a tendency to look at it and start reading about Tempe and looking at Tempe, and I've been to Tempe on vacation many times, friends in Chandler, so I know the area, so I was intrigued, and so I started to learn more and more about the police department and everything that happens here. Then I looked inward and said, well, do I fit? Because you have to fit. You have to have the skills that they need and the experiences that they need you to have. And so as I looked at my experience in Pasadena with our, Pasadena has a bustling downtown, 30,000, 40,000 people on the street every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, much like you have. I looked at my experience with the Rose Bowl and the Rose Parade and everything that happens in and around that. Very similar to all the events that you host. And then I looked at my experience with the colleges in Riverside, 50,000 kids live in our community, very similar to what you have. And then I looked at the size of my agency and the size of your agency, your calls for service, the busyness of the agency. And I saw that we were a little bit bigger and a little bit busier, but not much. The landmass was about twice as much, and so you're a little denser. So I began to formulate the idea that, hey, I might fit in here. And I like Arizona. I would like to end up in Arizona. I had to abide by one rule, and that one rule was given to me by my wife, and she said, if we're going to leave, I have to be by an airport, because she works for the airlines, and she would need to transfer to somewhere that she can drive and go to work. She said, you're not going to bring me to a community. I'm not going to stay at home, and I want to work. So on the personal note, my kids have left the house. One's in the Air Force, and one is going to be a lawyer. And by the way, I made her sign a document that said you can never sue police. Otherwise, you owe me what I paid, for you to go to law school. I've got that document. It's very crude, but I'm sure it'll stand up in court. So it's kind of our time to maybe do something different and do something challenging. And I think as human beings, we seek something maybe that's harder than what you're doing or more challenging than what you're doing. I like change. I like to involve myself in getting myself better and helping others get better. As a manager, you asked about my management style. I am very far away. I don't know how you range this. I don't micromanage. I hate the word empower, but I want people below me to make decisions. I believe that police employees and any other employee in the city, they're mature, good people. They're going to do their best and make the best decision with what's in front of them. And we'll live with that decision. Bill Gates said he only learned from his mistakes. Mistakes are okay. We learn from them, we get better, and we usually don't make those mistakes again. Now, if I have an employee who's making them over and over and over, I'll deal with that. So I like to give direction and ask for results and let people be creative and get us there. And it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to give people, when you tell a commander, this is your command, you're going to make decisions for your command, and their juices start to flow, their imagination, and as a department you get better because you've empowered people. And that fits into community policing. Community policing isn't a top-down approach. It's a bottom-up approach. You empower people to make decisions, cut through red tape, and get things done. It's a risky proposition sometimes. Mistakes do get made, as I mentioned, but I'm willing to take those risks and let employees be empowered and solve problems in the neighborhoods.
So I too will start at the end and work my way back. Yes, I believe in neighborhood associations, and yes, I would love to go. Like Chief Vecino talked about, that is the great connective part of our job that we enjoy. There are many other parts, but that's a big one. The middle part was leadership. What is my leadership philosophy? Well, I believe in adaptive leadership. And to understand what this is there's technical fixes to things. That means that the current way of doing business, the current knowledge within the agency, we know how to fix stuff. We know how to do it. It's quick, it's easy, we get it done. However, an adaptive leadership approach identifies an issue, does the gritty work, and looks for a often creative and long-term approach. And how I explain this is, and Marty Linsky, in his book, Leadership on the Line, and all this teaching to cops and to educators and a whole host of people talks about this. How he describes it is this. He says, a technical fix is like you go to your doctor and your doctor says, hey, you've got high blood pressure, take this pill. The knowledge exists in creating the pill. You take the pill and likely the result is a reduction in blood pressure. Quick, easy, doesn't take a lot of thought. However, adaptive leadership says that we have a problem. We take a creative fix to it. We have high blood pressure. Let's look at all the things that are leading to this condition. It is the work that looks beyond just a simple fix. It looks at what are the root causes of the problem that we are faced with. I believe in leadership, we lead by example. I believe wholly, and teachers have taught, that we don't have to espouse our values because our behaviors are in fact the illustration, the exemplification of our values. So how I behave as a leader demonstrates my values and what's important. So I take leading by example very seriously. And my mom used to say to me, Sylvia, remember who you are and whom you represent. Every time I went out with my friends. And I've said before, I'm like 9. What does that mean? Well, that had meaning for me because I recognized what I did, how I treated people. I don't always have to be nice, but I have to be kind. That reflected on those that I represent. And that is part of how I will represent Tempe. You asked also, why do I want to come here? It's this perfect intersection for me of professional and personal. Half of my family lives in Phoenix. And I go to Phoenix a lot. And I really like them. And I love them. That is an immediate, instant support mechanism for me. It is a desire and a connectivity for me in the region. And the professional pieces, all of my experience, the things that excite me and I love doing are represented in Tempe. And you know how Tempe got on my map, on my radar? And how I became completely infatuated with this department in this city is an amazing and inspiring cop named Julie was giving a presentation about an event that occurred. And she was speaking at the Women Leaders in Law Enforcement Conference in California. And at that conference, that 800 women leaders were there from across the nation at this conference. She was telling of this very incredible and compelling event that she had. And I thought, that is a person of incredible courage, incredible honesty, incredible vulnerability. Where does she work? And it was Tempe. And if Tempe PD is smart enough to hire a person like that, and cultivate her and hold her up as an example, I want to be part of it. For me, and I've said it before, and I said it to the employees, and I genuinely meant it. From the inside, they're part of Tempe PD. I don't think they know how great they are, how revered they are, how respected they are, and how much they can grow and strengthen the great policing that they do. I want to be a part of that. So thank you for the question.
Well, to keep it consistent, I'll start with the last part too.
Good point.
So the answer is yes. You know, there's an added benefit that I've discovered going to a lot of these homeowners neighborhood association meetings, and that is they have some of the best food I've ever had in my life at some of these events. But it is one of the favorite things that I have with this job, because it is not, there's occasions when I go to the neighborhood meeting and I am hit with questions, and they're very, very difficult questions, and I am there to resolve that issue. But most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, it is just talking to the people in this community. It's talking to the people in a way that I don't usually get to talk to them. And so that's what I love about it. But the important thing that I need to do is I need to connect the 500 people in the organization to those same folks. Understand what that value is and what a great thing it is to go to those meetings and connect with our community in a different way when you're not stopping them on a traffic stop or you're not doing some enforcement functions. This is the time when police officers and police employees can connect in a different way. And so that's what I look forward to doing. I'll go to the first part of the question, which is just about this position in itself. I have some friends, some very, very good friends, in fact, who I think they would believe that their career would be a complete and utter failure if they weren't police chiefs somewhere. Somewhere. I have to be chief. I have to be chief or I fail. I do not fall in that category. I have had a wonderful career. I have loved every second of it. It's been great being here. But this is an opportunity that doesn't come up very often. In Tempe, it's been 10 years or so. This is a great opportunity for me. And the reason it's exciting to me is because I can continue connecting with the community, working with the finest police department in my mind in the country. It's the people that I love in the organization. It is continuing that. There are a lot of things that we need to do. There's going to be a lot of work to be done, but I would not pick a greater community, a greater department to work with than this one right here in Tempe.
I'll applaud you for that too, man.
Okay, because we're at 8 o'clock, what we'll do is we'll keep the closing comments to about 2 minutes each. We'll start with, let's see here, got a little out of order that last time, so we'll go with Chief Moyer, and then Chief Rush, and then Chief Facino.
So this is really about answering the question for you that I asked in the beginning. My guess, my hunch was that you were here because you wanted to know what might it be like if this person was our chief. My hope for you is that you can reflect on the commitment that you've made in the last couple of hours to answer that question. And my hope for you is that you've identified that you have a bright and compelling future in a police chief in Tempe. I think I found over my career that it is the people that care more than most people think is safe that make really good cops. When I come to Tempe, I'm not only going to leverage my education and what I've learned at the Naval Postgraduate School and in grad school and in my undergraduate teachings, that stuff, the academic stuff that helped me think and helped me evaluate and analyze and create strategy and policy, but I'm going to leverage my experience. And that experience hasn't always been great. That experience has been being beside people as they're suffering and to shoulder the burden of people suffering, people that are discontent, people that don't feel connected to the police department. To lean into that and say, what can we do to move through this? If it's suffering, cops are really good at being beside people when they're suffering, and to lean into the humanity of what that's like. If it's an employee, I will be there with them. We will have a system that supports employees when they are in times of crisis, so they can be better servants of people. And I will bring the experience of the really good stuff and the positive things that I've learned about the nobility of policing. But what you will get, if I'm your chief, is you'll get somebody that wants to speak to the critics, wants to say, why are you discontent? Let's talk about it. Let's fix this together. We include people. We have a large in-group where everybody has a voice. They should be able to have open access to me as the chief. Currently, I have people email me day and night, and my cops and command staff are like, Chief, take your email address off of the website and come up with a fake one, and we'll start handling these for you. I don't believe in that because I believe in open access. So what you get with me is you'll get an authentic person who's answering the call to service and wants everyone to have a voice and to partner toward this compelling future that I see before us.
You know, recently I went to an international chiefs conference, IACP, and I signed up for this class, and the class was titled something like, how to manage police organizations in this very trying time, or something like that. And right when I got in my seat, they got up and announced, there has been some substitutions. The things that are on your schedule that were sent out to you 3 months ago, we have some updates. 3 of those police chiefs were terminated from the time that outline had been sent out to the conference. And that should tell you a lot about what is going on in policing. And I'll say one thing that pretty much introduced every class for the last year, and that was this is a very difficult time for our profession. That's how it starts. But every one of us up here, every chief that's hired to do a job. Every one of them are hired as a change agent. The trick for a chief is to understand what changes need to be made and how much change needs to be made in the organization. And in my career, I have gone from an empty lake bed to Apache Boulevard being run over by prostitutes, and it has evolved so much in this city. This is not just a challenging time for the profession. This is an opportunity for us to make some changes. It's an opportunity for the city. It's an opportunity for the community and the police department can move our city forward. This is a dynamic, exciting city. It always has been, and it always will be. And so my job is to understand our community, what is going on nationally, and how to apply it to make it meaningful for our community.
Take a couple of my minutes to tell you that I didn't know Sylvia or John before today, but listening to their answers over the last 1,000,000 hours, it feels like, I have the deepest respect for them. I think that everything that I have heard from them, I will say to you that you are in good hands. I'm one of 7 when I was raised. The runt of the litter, the last, not a mama's boy though. 5 brothers, 2 sisters. My house was so chaotic growing up that the boys would be locked outside while they fed the girls so they could get enough food. My brothers and I were animals growing up. My dad was a great basketball player back in his day. He raised a bunch of athletes. It was interesting to watch us break each other's records as we went through high school. But he kept us humble. On our refrigerator, not with a switch, just with that look and those right words at the right times. On our refrigerator there was taped in his handwriting, humility is the greatest human quality. And so when you asked about leadership style, the ability to tell a citizen, I'm sorry, we screwed up, that goes a long way. The ability when the cops do good to push them to the front and you stand back in the shadow and let them take the glory. The ability when they screw up for you to go to the front, for you to take that pounding from the community and let them stand in the shadows at that point. The credit never goes to the police chief, nor should it ever. It should go to those who are doing the real work, those officers and those detectives and those sergeants and those lieutenants and those commanders, the ones that are really, really out there working. So that humility that I have been taught from my family transfers to being a police chief, and that is what you'll come to expect from me. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this forum. It was very valuable to have so many excellent questions coming from the audience and those that were written before. And they're not exaggerating. They went through a really long day today. It's been about 12 hours long, and they've gone through 6 hours worth of forums. And that's just the beginning. But I think I want to recognize what an excellent job you've done, and appreciate. What I would like to ask is the forums information that you have is so very important for us in order to get your feedback. So if you don't mind taking a few minutes, if you haven't already, and fill out the forms. There's drop boxes out in the front. And also I wanted to let you know that online, if you go to City Hall, then go to the Communications and Media Relations, you'll see that there's a police chief candidate section there, and there you can also post additional comments or questions. The questions that were submitted today, those will be forwarded on to the city manager, and they may be used as the process continues over the next 2 days. And thank you so much. I'm going to hand over the mic to City Manager Andrew.
Thank you, and thank you, Lawrence, for moderating this. You did a great job. Thank you for your time. And thank you to the other HR staff who has been staffing this all day to make sure that these forums were run well, and they did a great job. Just to echo what Lawrence just said, if your question wasn't asked, I would urge you to go ahead and submit it on the cards or go online. We will have other opportunities. These candidates will have additional forums with our department directors. They're going to be meeting with our employee group leaders tomorrow. There'll be a stakeholder lunch forum that I'll be hosting with various members of the community. They will be meeting with our elected officials. They will be having a tour of our police facilities. And then lastly, Friday morning, they will each have a final panel interview that will be moderated by myself. So, and also some other members of staff. So there will be other opportunities for these questions to be asked. I want to make sure that you understand that we couldn't get to everybody, but I do appreciate it. Go ahead, write them out, send them through, and we'll review them and make sure that at least some of them do in fact get answered. So thank you again. Appreciate it.